flower. Third principle, sensazione, be sharp. Fourth principle, sfumato, cultivate your intuition. Arte scienza, that's the two hemispheres of the brain. That's my drawing of the two hemispheres of the brain. Balance the brain. Corporalità, balance the body. And connezione, that's the infinity symbol, recognizing the importance of being a systems thinker. So you start to look for connections between all your different subjects and topics. A la Leonardo da Vinci. So, could this have been my notes for this talk? Say yes. Yes. If you copy this down, wouldn't this be good notes? If you needed to, let's say you were going to get an exam on the 7 principles. This would be good notes for you, yes? Very efficient. If you didn't have a chance to look at this, but next week somebody said, oh, that Michael Gelb came and talked to you, he showed you a mind map. What was on it? What parts of it do you think you might remember? The pictures, right? See, what are the left hemisphere logical elements in a mind map? The key words, right? When your professor's speaking, don't you want to really try to figure out what are the most important things that my professor is sharing and capture the key points? That's a logical skill. It will make you sharper. What are the right brain imaginative elements in the mind map? The pictures. Instead of separating off the mind to doodle over here and then coming back to the serious work over here, we take the pictures and we make it part of the notes. Much easier to remember. Much more stimulating to your imagination. Same thing with color. Plus, you know what you can do? So you notice I seem a little bit enthusiastic about mind mapping? You see I'm a little enthusiastic? You know why? Because in 1978, I was working on my master's thesis. And I went to this, I did a program, it was called the Scholars in Europe program, and you had to make up an original topic and then defend it. And they really wanted you to think for yourself. And I had done very well in college, but I mostly did it by feeding back what the professors wanted to hear. And now to get my master's degree, I had to write a 100-page thesis of my own ideas. Dimostrazione, I had to think for myself. And even though I thought that was a great notion, I started with a big blank sheet of paper, and I learned outlining. I put a Roman numeral 1, and I went, uh-oh. Nothing. It was a blank. But then I met Tony Buzan. He taught me mind mapping. So I put flip chart paper on the walls of my flat in London. I got colored pens, and I just started drawing pictures and putting keywords. I printed the keywords so I'd be able to read them later. And my mind exploded because all of a sudden I just was going for quantity of ideas. Little did I know at the time that Thomas Edison had written, if you want to get a great idea, get a lot of ideas. Anyway, I just got a lot of ideas, and it was very messy. So what did I do? I stepped back, and then I looked at it all, and I said, what are the most important points here? And I took a yellow highlighter, and I highlighted what looked like the most important points. Then I thought, what order should I put them in? And it was so obvious, once I laid out all the information, I just put them in the order. Now this is such ancient history, I wrote my thesis out longhand. No word processing back then. A friend of mine typed it up, sent it into my thesis advisor, and my thesis advisor said, I've never seen a student's writing improve so much in the course of my career as a professor. My professor said, it's as though you discovered your true voice, which I did. And it became my mission to help you discover yours. And then a friend of mine read my master's thesis and said, wow, you made this complex subject so simple. So he sent it to a publisher, and they accepted it. It got translated into 16 languages, and it is still in print more than 30 years later. That's how I became an author. I said, this is fun. It beats a regular job. So I wrote the next book and the next one, and I kept writing them. all with mind maps. So you can do the same thing with your thesis, with your essay for your exam. So we have a little time left, so I thought I'd just give you a quick insight into the mind of another historically great genius, Thomas Edison. When this book was published, Innovate Like Edison, which I wrote using mind maps, I was interviewed. Do you know the paper USA Today? Do they have it down here? Because it's global, they do have a global edition. Anyway, I was interviewed by USA Today. And they said, if Da Vinci and Edison got together, what might they ask each other? And I said, I think that Da Vinci would ask Edison about the nature of light. And Edison would ask Da Vinci, do you want a job? Because just as Leonardo da Vinci is probably the supreme role model for developing all of your creative power, Thomas Edison is probably the greatest entrepreneur who ever lived. So let's dive right in and ask the question, what was Thomas Edison's greatest invention? Edison invented the light bulb, but you know, other people had actually invented light bulbs. There we go, thank you, Maria. Other people had invented light bulbs, but you know what the problem was? They didn't work. They blew up, they caused fires, you couldn't monitor the power, and therefore you couldn't turn it into a business and make money. Edison didn't just invent the light bulb, he invented the system for illuminating the whole world. Do you know that 1 year before Edison got the light bulb to burn for 13.5 hours, 1 year before, the head of the British Royal Institution of Science, the most powerful scientific organization in the world, stated, practical incandescence is utterly impossible. He didn't say it was difficult. He didn't say it was a long shot. He said it was utterly impossible. 1 year later, Edison gets the light bulb to burn for 13.5 hours. A year after that, the whole world was illuminated. You realize that 125 years ago, there were no electric lights. Your choice was candles or gas lamps. That was it. Edison illuminated the whole world, but I propose to you it's not his greatest invention. So maybe you say, it's the phonograph. You know, Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, which means he launched the modern recording industry. You like to listen to recorded music? You like to listen to music on your iPod or whatever? Well, you owe it to Thomas Edison, because 125 years ago, if you didn't hear the speech or the musical performance, it was over for all of human history. See, and Edison didn't just invent the phonograph. He had to invent the recording studio and the microphone and the record. But it's still not his greatest invention. So you say, okay, then it has to be the movie camera. Thomas Edison invented the movie camera and the movie studio. Where's the world's first movie studio? Is it in Hollywood? It's in New Jersey. Invented by Thomas Edison. It's called the Black Maria. So Edison invented 3 entirely new industries that changed the world forever. But none of them, I propose to you, are his greatest invention. Thomas Edison's greatest invention is the process of systematic innovation. The process of systematic innovation. Thomas Edison invented research and development. And then he came up with the idea of linking research and development to manufacturing, production, marketing, and sales. And this business model innovation changed the world even more profoundly than his individual great inventions. So here's Edison, age 13 in the upper left-hand corner. In these 2 images in the bottom right, that's Edison in his 80s. When he was 13 years old, his mother had to take him out of school because he he couldn't sit still. He asked too many questions. When he was 13, he said to his mom, I want to get a job. I want to work. He had a very strong entrepreneurial drive. She said, okay, so he got a job working on a railroad car as a newsboy selling newspapers. Within a week of his job, he organized all the other newsboys into teams working for him. And he said, why are we only selling newspapers? We could shine people's shoes. We could sell candy and gum. So he expanded the product line. After about a few months of this, he came up with a brilliant idea. He said, why are we selling someone else's newspaper? He said, why don't we publish our own? And Thomas Edison became the world's first newspaper publisher on a moving train. Now, do you know what the big high-tech field was in Edison's time? You know, the last 40 years it's been software. In Edison's time, it was telegraphy. The telegraph was the cool, high-tech thing that everybody wanted to learn how to do. So Edison became a master telegrapher, and then he came up with a great marketing idea for his newspaper. At each stop of the rail car, before they got there, he would send a telegram to the station master with teasers about the stories in his newspaper. Word would spread. He'd come to every stop, and he'd sell out his newspapers. He made a fortune at age 14. He invested his profits into a chemistry laboratory, which he built on the moving train. And this worked really well until he blew up the train. But what you get is a feeling for this incredible, pure entrepreneurial drive that then continued throughout his entire life. By the time Edison was in his 80s, he was a hero around the world. People recognized that he was the person who illuminated the world and gave us music and the movies. About 10 years ago, I was in my office and I got a phone call from this woman, Sarah Miller Caldecott. And she said, I'm Thomas Edison's great-great-grandniece. She said, I read your book on Leonardo da Vinci and I was very inspired and I wanted to talk to you. And then she told me she had an MBA from Dartmouth as well. So in that moment, I had an entrepreneurial idea. A light bulb went off in my brain. I said, we should write a book together about Thomas Edison. We'll do for Edison what I did for Da Vinci. And with your family connections to Edison, it'll open up all the doors so we can meet the great Edison scholars. Plus, the other thing she told me was that her great-great-grandfather, Lewis Miller, was a member of the United States National Inventors Hall of Fame. He had 73 United States patents on his own. And I realized right away in that moment that that would also give us access to the current members of the National Inventors Hall of Fame. So that if we could figure out what Edison did, then we could ask the National Inventors Hall of Fame members today, are you still doing this? And if they said yes, we'd have a basis of something that could be very powerful. Now, I didn't tell Sarah this. You know how you get an idea all at once? It was just one of those ideas from the 11 square mile. I didn't tell her this right away. I waited till a few conversations later, but she loved the idea and we worked together very harmoniously. Together we identified these 5 competencies for innovating like Edison. And each competency has 5 elements, so there's 25 elements altogether. Now in the next 20 minutes, we don't have time to go through them, but what I'm going to do is just introduce you at least to the very first one, which is incredibly important because it makes everything else possible. By the way, it was Peter Drucker, who passed away a couple of years ago, said that today innovation is important not just in business. Today innovation is important in society probably more than ever before. We talk about social innovation. And it's absolutely critical to the health and effectiveness of our society if we're going to solve our world's problems, if we're going to, and these are all solvable problems. We have the resources to solve all these problems. We need the will and the focus and the participation. So the number one competence is innovation. And Thomas Edison had a very noble life philosophy. He said, my vision is to bring out the secrets of nature for the happiness of humanity. That's pretty noble, isn't it? And if you think about it, he was really good at it. You know, he figured out ways to make lots of people happy. Light makes everybody happy. There's nobody who said, no, thanks, I don't really want electric light. I'd rather stay here in the dark. You know, I don't want to listen to my favorite music. Thanks very much, Edison. You can keep that. Oh, the movies, no, let's not bother. There was things that everybody in the world wants. I mean, it's really good. You know, if you want to be successful in life, think about ways of making other people happy. Think about a reliable way to help make other people happy. Because here's the other genius thing that Edison said. He wasn't just an altruist. He loved to make a difference in the world. He had high noble principles, but he also said this. He said, anything that won't sell, I don't want to invent. Sales are proof of utility, and utility is success. And you know when he said this? This is great. In his 20s, he invented a vote counting and recording machine. It was amazing. Legislators could sit at their seats, press a button, have their vote counted instantaneously and accurately. He could not sell one of them because then, as now, legislators didn't want their votes counted accurately. They wanted to pay each other off and schmooze in politics. So Edison said, forget it. If it doesn't sell, what's the point? So some reporters asked Edison, they said, what are the secrets in your laboratory? And Edison responded, we don't have any rules here because we're actually trying to accomplish something. But Sarah and I suspected that there were implicit rules for innovating like Edison. We were determined to find out what they were. Hey, I wonder, I don't know if this was in Mexico, but it was in a lot of magazines in the United States. This is the Chevy Volt, you know, their electric car. That's the lead designer for the Chevy Volt. And he's holding a sign that says Thomas Edison was right. Why? Because Thomas Edison invented the electric storage battery designed to power the automobile 100 years ago. Problem is, it took him 10 years to perfect it, and by the time he perfected it, his friend Henry Ford was already using the combustion engine. Edison still made millions from the electric storage battery, but he had a vision 100 years ago. Well, all I can tell you is he went to the President of the United States and his friend Henry Ford and his friend Harvey Firestone, and he said, we better figure out how to harness the energy of the sun before all the coal and gas run out. There are 5 competencies for innovating like Edison. And you know, Maria, if you like, you can copy this for anybody who wants to get a copy or send us them. Anybody can keep all the notes. There are 5 competencies: solution-centered mindset, kaleidoscopic thinking, full spectrum engagement, mastermind collaboration, super value creation. Solution-centered mindset was the basic attitude you had to have if you wanted to work with Edison's team. And we're going to talk about the first principle of solution-centered mindset. Kaleidoscopic thinking were Edison's strategies for generating lots of ideas, for being so productive and solving so many problems. He gives the same advice that Leonardo gives: generate first, then organize. If you want to get a great idea, get a lot of ideas. Work with total intensity, then sleep on it, and write down your ideas in your notebook. Rinse and repeat. Mastermind full spectrum engagement refers to Edison's strategies for balancing his energy. When you work so hard, you have to learn to relax. When you have incredible intensity, you have to also maintain your sense of humor. Mastermind collaboration refers to Edison's strategy for innovating, which was to get diverse people together and get them to collaborate. He said, if you want innovation, you need people from different backgrounds. If everybody has the same engineer with the same orientation, you're not going to get innovation. He would mix an engineer, a mechanical engineer, and an electrical engineer, somebody with a PhD and somebody who didn't finish high school. You know, Thomas Edison offered George Washington Carver 6 figures to come work in his laboratory. This is more than 100 years ago. So he said, bring diverse people together, inspire them to collaborate. And then super value creation, he said, focus on the value you're creating. And super means your value is more than somebody else's. He said, if we create more value, our success is guaranteed. It's a simple principle, but it makes sense today as much as it did in Edison's time. So, solution-centered mindset. We're going to focus in primarily on this first principle of aligning your goals with your passions. Aligning your goals with your passions. Edison said, I continue to find my greatest pleasure and so my reward in the work that precedes what the world calls success. What does that mean? It means he loves what he does. It's the simplest coaching advice in the world. Find something you love to do that creates value for other people, and you will have a happy and successful life. Have you heard this acronym? You know what an acronym is? It's a symbol with letters to represent a longer phrase. A lot of my clients, I work with lots of businesses, they have what I call their HAC. High acronym cultures. They like to use cultures. When you out into the business world, they use acronyms all the time. I wonder if you heard of this acronym for goal setting. It's called SMART. Do you know this? I'm going to share it with you because it's a great secret for setting goals. When you want to set a goal for anything in life, start by making it specific. Start by making it specific. So if you say to yourself, I want to do well in school, is that a specific goal? No. We can't measure that. What would be a specific goal? I want a grade point average of 3.8 in the following subjects. I want to graduate on this date with honors. For example, that would be specific, yes? And the beauty of making it specific is you feel there's so much more energy in saying, I will have this grade point average, I will graduate here, than just saying, yeah, I want to do well in school. Yeah, it'd be nice to do well in school. Well, you're not going to do well in school if you have a wishy-washy, blah, blah goal. That's not how the world works. There's no magic success fairy that's going to come down and say, okay, you want to do well? Thanks, here it is. No, you have to focus your 100 billion brain cells really specifically on exactly what you want. The beauty is that's where the M comes in. It's measurable. You can say, okay, I got a 3.6, not a 3.8, I have to work harder. A stands for accountable. What does that mean? Is anybody else going to do your homework for you and get you that? No, it's you. You're accountable for it 100%. You're 100% responsible for the results you get in your life. No excuses. The world does not care about your excuses. They're just absolutely, utterly irrelevant. Even if you're right. Even if it was terrible what happened to you, and oh my God, it still doesn't matter. It's up to you. Just up to you. I mean, God bless you. I hope you get help and support and love and wonderful breaks and the best luck in your life. But bottom line, you're accountable for the results you get in your life. That's it. The R stands for relevant. And this is very important. Don't set a goal if it isn't relevant to your highest purpose, to what's really important to you. You know, why do you want to do well in school? Because you want to do well in life, and it helps. And the T stands for a timeline. So you haven't set a goal until you say the time by which it's going to be finished. You know, when I tell my publisher, okay, I'll write this book, we always say, here's the day it will be submitted. If I just say, oh, it would be nice to write a book, sometime I'll get around to writing a book, you never write a book. I write down the date, then I write it down on my desk, I write it down on my wall, it's seared into my brain, and I've never been late. So until you set the time by which your goal will be completed, you haven't set a goal. You're just fantasizing. But see, now this SMART acronym is very good for goal setting by itself. If you do this with all your goals in life, you'll be way ahead of the average person. But you notice that there's a big space in my PowerPoint slide, so you probably already figured out that there's more to it, yes? Because if you're interested in goal setting, isn't Edison a good role model? I mean, created 3 entirely new industries, became a multi-billionaire, made hundreds of other people into multi-millionaires. That's probably a reasonable role model for goal setting, yeah? We might pay attention to what he tells us. So I figured out, it was very clear because he gave lots of interviews to the press about what you can do to be successful. He was very generous, trying to help other people. Here's what you need to do to be successful. Here's how you set a goal. Always set the time. Make it as specific as you can. Find a way to measure your progress. Make it relevant to your most important thing and know that only you are accountable for achieving it. That's the beginning. Then I came up with the second part of the acronym for the rest of his advice. Edison, when you set a goal, it has to be emotional, not just intellectual. Your heart has to be in it, otherwise you're not going to remember to do it. It's just that simple. That's why it's so important to find things that you actually love to do. Now, sometimes you have to do things you don't love to do, but they're relevant because you're doing them because it means you'll get to do other things that you do love to do. The D stands for decisive, and this may be the most important part of goal setting. It's to decide with the full force of your being that you're going to achieve it, even if you can't see how you're going to get it done. When the odds seem impossible, you decide you're going to do it anyway. See, because Thomas Edison didn't say it would be nice to light the world. I'll try to light the world. He said, the world will be illuminated. That's the spirit you have to be. You have to decide. 100%, not 90%, not 95%. Oh, I'd like to make the soccer team. I'd like to be fit. I'd like to have 100-yard dash time of whatever. No, gotta say, I shall do it. It's done. I'm committed 100%. The I stands for integrated. Now, what I'm going to tell you is that this smart Edison goal setting system is so powerful. Make sure you integrate your goals. What does that mean? It means that when you set your goal for school, also set your goal for health and for your friendships and for your spiritual life. So you look at your life as a whole pattern and you set goals for each area of your life in a way that each part supports the other part. The S stands for sensory, and what this means is when you're imagining a goal, use all your senses. Anybody play sports? Like play sports? You play any competitive sport against another team? Right? So you imagine you'd like to win, right? So picture yourself winning. Picture yourself, imagine the feeling of scoring the goal. Imagine the feeling of throwing the ball in just to your teammate who passes it to the other teammate and scores the goal. Picture it with all your senses. The more senses you bring to your imagination of your goal, the more real it will be. Have you ever said to yourself or heard somebody else say, I wanted it so much I could taste it? When people say that, they almost always get what they want. The O stands for optimistic. And we already talked about the importance of optimism. There's no goal achievement without optimism, and there's no innovation without optimism. If you don't believe you can do it, you're not going to do it. It's just that simple. It doesn't magically mean that just because you say, ooh, I'm optimistic, that all of a sudden it happens. No. It's just that when you say, I can't do it, you will always be right. Optimism is just a condition that makes it possible. But here's the good news. You have 100 billion brain cells. You see what this does? This focuses those brain cells on success. So that every night when you're sleeping on the problem of how do I be more successful? How do I win the game? Get the GPA I want, whatever it happens to be. And the N stands for now, which has a double meaning. Begin it now. Whatever you really want to do in your life. I mean, what's today, the 22nd of August, 2000? Make today the day you decide to do what you really want to do. Right now, today. And then visualize it complete. Imagine yourself successful. So I got to tell you something that's really cool. We actually practice this, and I do this with all my books and all my where it doesn't mean that life is always magically successful. I have as many hardships and setbacks and challenges as anybody else. That's the point. This makes you much stronger, more resilient in the face of those setbacks. So one thing we do in our house, we have we call it a vision board. We have it on our dresser. And we just cut out images of things that represent our life goals. Now, my wife is an opera singer. And one of her life goals was to sing at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. So one of the things we cut out, and when she was 6 years old, she heard Maria Callas sing Una voce poco fa. And she said, that's what I want to be. And her lifetime goal was to sing at the Met. So we got a picture of what the Metropolitan Opera looks like when you're on the stage. So in other words, it's like my view of you, except it's the Metropolitan Opera stage, and there's the Met. And we put it on this board. So lots of frustrations, they don't even call, you try to get an audition, forget about it, there's a million people, it's not happening. But we just, every morning there's that image. And we look at each other's images so we can support each other. So about 6 months ago, I get an email from somebody who wants me to speak at a conference for kids in Eastern Europe. And she said, I'm a big fan of your work. I love Leonardo. I love Edison. She said, and I was looking on your website, and I saw that you have a link on your website to this opera singer. She said, I'm very much involved with opera. She said, I'm the assistant to the musical director of the Metropolitan Opera. So I said, well, that person on my link on my website, that's my wife. I said, I'll be happy to donate my time to this charity event that you're doing for these kids in Eastern Europe. I said, and why don't you take a minute and listen to the samples of the music on the website? So she writes back to me. She said, oh, my God, I listened to your wife's voice. The musicality is phenomenal. She said, we need this at the Metropolitan Opera. So next time we went to New York, she auditioned at the Met, and she's singing there in January and February. So, this is really real. This is real. Now, it took years. That was on there for 7 years before this happened. That's a long time to not be singing at the Met when it's your life dream. So it's not necessarily, it's not like you put up the picture and, oh, thank you very much, you put up the picture, here you go, you're in. But it's also that success comes to you when your mind is prepared. So because her goal is my goal, because that picture is, I see it every morning too, the second I heard that this lady was somehow connected to the Met, I knew we were in. I mean, she still has to deliver the goods. She happens to have a fabulous voice, but you get the idea, right? So what I want you to do, we're going to finish in 2 minutes. What I want you to do is think about your goals, and today write down the Smart Edison for your own goals in your own life. So I first learned how to juggle many years ago. I saw somebody do it, and I thought it was incredibly beautiful. It looked to me like moving sculpture. I went up to this great juggler, and I asked him to teach me, but you know what he told me? Because he wasn't such a good teacher. He said, take these 3 balls, throw them up. Don't let any of them drop. Did you ever get an instruction like that in the course of your school? Anyway, I really wanted to learn, so I tried hard, but I failed miserably. But then I had a breakthrough, which you're going to have now. I realized that if I could maintain my curiosità, be more curious and open like a child, it would be much easier. Dimostrazione was clear. I had to figure it out for myself. I couldn't count on the teacher. Sensazione, I started to pay attention to the color and the rhythm. Sfumato, I realized that learning anything was a journey into the unknown. Arte, scienza, and corporalità were all about balance. And connezione, that's when I had the enlightenment that you can have if you meditate on this pattern. What is this pattern? It's the infinity pattern, isn't it? It represents your infinite potential to think like Leonardo and innovate like Edison. The art critic Bernard Berenson said of Leonardo da Vinci that everything he touched turned to eternal beauty. And it's my wish for you that you'll bring the principles we've learned today to bring that beauty to your life every single day. Grazie mille. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
To give you some words, but thank you very much.
Yeah.
In the name of our school, this is Chris.
Thank you.
This is the art that you can see if you have
Fantastic.
the time.
I love it. Thank you.
And this is just a
Ooh, how nice. Thank you very much. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.